Hey boys and girls, Chris here, and in this movie we're going to talk about the deghosting aspects of HDR. So I'm not going to talk about the importance of bringing in a raw file and noise reduction and so on and so forth. We're just going to focus on deghosting, and I am going to be using JPEG files just in the interest of time. So here I've got the three raw files, but the three JPEGs that were exported. And through this process, I'm very big on keeping it uniform I use Lightroom, whether you use Aperture or Bridge, but keeping it in the same platform so we can manage things simpler and more thoroughly. So I'm going to select all three of my JPEGs. And in this first example, I'm just going to go Photo, Edit In, and I'm going to merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. So I'm going to use Photoshop's engine to merge these files. Now it's important to note that I am just merging them in Photoshop. I don't find the tone mappers very intuitive in Photoshop, but the merging aspects are very nice. So we're seeing the files, even though they're just JPEGs, it's taking a little bit more time than I would like, but here we are. And let's look at the interface for a second. 32-bit, we're just merging this. We're not mapping it back. But if we were to map it back, we'd have to go to 16-bit or to 8-bit. And you notice we get more options here when we use certain methods to map it back. So this process of merging it is we're taking all of these files, these 12-bit files, let's say, that the camera produces, and we're merging all three of them together to produce a 32-bit file. That we have tons of information, and that's all we're doing here. We've got evenly spaced images here, one step apart, and notice what happens to the water in the sky when I turn the remove ghosts on and off. There it is on. So notice the sky and the water. I'm just looking at probably one exposure there for the stuff that it is detected movement in, or I've got a smooth rendition. The problem here is this is automatic. It's deciding what is moving and what's not. It's not allowing you to interact with it at all. But nonetheless, there is some things there that will be very helpful in certain situations. So let's look at another aspect of this. In the movement section here, I will select these pictures, these 4 JPEGs, and I will merge them in through Lightroom using the plugin for Photomatix. Photomatix is one of the more popular tone mapping and merging applications out there, and it works great with Lightroom. So here I will probably reduce noise or chromatic aberration as well, but I'm not in the interest of time. But this is the important one. Show option to remove ghosts. We want to check that. So I'll hit export, and it's going to you'll notice up here that it's exporting each of the files as TIFF files as it brings it into Photomatix. Now when it brings it into Photomatix, it's bringing it into an intermediary step with Photomatix to do the deghosting, and we'll see how that works here in just a second. As soon as this brings this up, I can be very selective about what it is that I'm concerned with. Now I'm concerned with this person here. This little ghosted image here. This person walked through the shot, and I got that person in one of the exposures. And I know it's in just one of the exposures because I can go through and look at all these exposures and say, this is my first exposure, second exposure, third exposure. There's my person, third exposure, fourth exposure not there. So third exposure, if I want to eliminate that, I want to not use the third exposure. So let's jump back to Photomatix. So all I do is circle the area of concern. Just making a copy of that. And if I right click or control click within it, I can remove the selection or set a photo for the selection. Now I didn't want to use my third photo, so I'm going to select my -1 EV and see if it takes it out. That is the one with it in it. So let's go return to selection mode, Set another photo. Let's go to the normal photo. Preview deghosting. Gone. So that is one example of how this can work. Here is yet another example. I will use these images here because this is a fairly extreme example. And here I will go under Photomatic again. Same settings. Just showing the deghosting. And it'll bring up these three files. Now, there's a lot of movement in this because I was dealing with a person, and because the person was moving in the picture, I can use these deghosting aspects, but I was also handheld. And for those reasons, I do have a bit of camera shake and a bit of, you can see the ghosting going on in here. So I can very simply select this part of the image where I definitely have some deghosting. Preview deghosting. Okay, return back to selection mode, and I might want to add another selection maybe down here, and maybe part of her face which was deghosted. And then I can just preview deghosting, and there you have it. There I have cleaner images that can be brought in and dealt with where you've got this movement, and you can be very selective about this, which you cannot be with the Photoshop method. And finally, if I look at let's look at these three images here, and let's merge those as well to Photomatics. We're looking at deghosting only, and you'll see movement in things like the leaves. You can see it in here. So if I make a change to these leaves and maybe these leaves, and then just preview deghosting, you'll notice that things get much sharper. And sometimes you need to actually process this and then look it over and see if you missed anything, and then possibly go back and remerge and re-deghost. But the fact that you're able to do this and you're able to do it selectively is very intuitive. And the final one I will show you will be this one here. Plug in extras, export to Photomatics, because this deals with people, cars, and a tree that happened to be swaying in the wind a little bit in this picture. So you see these folks here in this car and in this tree. So this tree, we can take, say, the top part of it. We can take this car, which we've got a little bit of movement in, and we can preview deghosting. And it will snap those things in there, and you notice I don't have any blur in the car or any shake in the camera. Now you can do that for other things, like if you're taking landscape pictures and you've got movement in some of the trees or in a whole waterway, and you just want to get one exposure used in its place. This is the way to do it. So Photomax, I think, is better equipped than Photoshop to deghost, which is one of the downsides for using the merging process in Photoshop versus Photomatic, is the deghosting. But it's still there to an automated degree, but I find it much better in Photomatic. So hopefully this has been instructional, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next movie.